God calls on Abraham to sacrifice Isaac.
And it has to do with all the things we were talking about until now, which is that if you think that you completely own something, like a purpose or a goal, if you think it's only
My
for
son.
you, no matter what it is, it will become infected. It won't be affording of true purpose and true life. It always has to be given up. And you know that too, because you've talked about this so many times, which is that when you raise a child, you know that you're going to give that child away.
To what?
Yeah.
To what?
Yeah. And so you're raising the child for someone else than yourself. Like, especially the idea even that you will give
Raising is the right word there.
And so you raise your daughter up, let's say as a father, I raise my daughter and then I give her in marriage to someone else. And it's like, but that's actually the only way for that to be real to me is if I understand that whatever it is that I have to offer it up towards something beyond it. And then it becomes real. As soon as I try to hold on to it.
Well, then you get it back too.
That's right.
You know, and then
this is what Jesus says. When Jesus says, those who try to save their life will lose it.
Yeah.
Right? And those who are willing to die, willing to lose their life will gain it. And it's a structural argument. It's something that is true at every single level of being. Because, even in the structure of any object or anything that you can understand, that let's say you take a car, right? And it's like the steering wheel in the car has to offer itself to the purpose of the car.
Right.
If the steering wheel has
doing that, you hit the ditch.
Then it's like a completely ridiculous fetishized object. Like, why would it? What's the point? All the parts of the car have to give themselves to the purpose of the car. But then even that car, you have to, when you buy it, you can fetishize it, but you can also use it for higher purposes. You visit your mother.
That's the proper relationship with money, by the way.
And then that's how all being is constituted. And so Abraham, God says, I'm going to give you a son. And then Abraham has a son. And then God says basically what he's saying. He doesn't say it right away. Abraham has to go through it for real. It's not just play acting. He's basically telling Abraham, if you want your son, you first have to give him to me.
Yeah.
You have to give him up towards something which transcends you and him and everything.
Yeah.
And if you do that, then you'll get it. Then you'll get him back.
Yeah.
But like I said, that's true of anything we do. If you're fixing the roads in the city, and the person fixing the roads is doing it just for their own interest, then they'll just be corrupt. And they'll won't fix them properly. We see that all the time in systems. What you would want,
they'll avoid the labor whenever they can.
Yeah,
They'll do a half-assed
is someone who knows what they're doing and the reason why they're doing it, and is willing to sacrifice their attention and energy towards the purpose. And then by doing that, they actually make a better road than if they just tried to hold on to what they're doing. But that's true, like I said, of every single thing that you do all the time. And that's the sacrificial aspect of this idea of offering up.
Yeah, well, it's very practical too. I mean, the psychoanalyst, I think it was Anna Freud, but maybe not, but I think it was Anna Freud, who pointed out that the good mother necessarily fails. Okay, so one of Freud's unheralded moves of genius, with that twist in it that Freud always had, was his observation essentially that human beings have the longest dependency period of any creature. Let's say 18 years. And so what that means is that bond, the bond that makes that dependency possible, is an unbelievably powerful force. The maternal instinct, let's say, the paternal instinct as well, but we'll focus on the maternal for now. That also means it can go terribly wrong, right? And that happens when a mother infantilizes her child because she doesn't want to let him go, to offer him up to some higher purpose, right? There's no purpose beyond the relationship between the mother and the son, let's say. Well, that's devouring. That's the Oedipal situation. That's sleeping in the same bed as your mother, which is something that literally happens in families that are particularly Oedipal, right? Too much closeness, right? And so that's a failure of the mother to offer the child to something beyond herself. That's also a form of female pride. There's no position for my son or daughter that's superordinate to their affiliation to me. And so that also stops them from, that's the evil queen in Snow White as well. that'll stop the daughter from being married or the son from being married. And like I've seen this in my clinical practice where spider-like mothers will cripple their children so they never leave.
Yeah.
But then the thing is, they don't have their children.
No.
Not least often because they end up suicidal.
Yeah.
Let's say, but they live in these terrible, dark households that make your soul ache when you walk into them. Right? There's just catastrophe and chaos everywhere, and everyone is crippled in body and soul. And the children are in the house not because they love the mother, who they would actually like to wreak horrible revenge upon. They're afraid to leave. And so what the mother ends up with instead of love is terrified, suicidal children who've crushed everything about them that should have been encouraged so that she can feed on their corpse, fundamentally.
But
brutal.
And the structure of the sacrifice of Abraham and Isaac, of Isaac, is one that we experience all the time. Just that people struggle to see it. We call it war. War is exactly that structure. We have a nation. We have a higher order structure, a higher order being, and that higher order being at some point asks the people to offer their children for the continuation of the existence of the higher order being. And sometimes in that case, they don't get them back, right?
Yeah.
Or they get their other children back, you could say.
Yeah.
You know, there's something of that going on. But the idea that the story of Abraham and Isaac, that it's some weird, completely freak thing that just shows the cruelty of God. It's like we deal with that all the time when we have war. Like they ask, you know, in World War II, we sacrificed our children because we believed that the higher order existence of our nations was worth preserving, and we're willing to give our children up to that purpose.
Well, we would say, too, that the parent who makes that offering will be able to tolerate the fact of the child's demise if the higher order structure above the nation is intact, so that the war is just, and it's just because it serves the eternal verities, and those are unified in something ineffable that sits at the top of the hierarchy. I mean, that's the story of World War II. I mean, there's many stories of World War II, but the fact that it was perceived and was inarguably just war meant that sacrificial offering was justified in a way that would stop it from being traumatic. Still terrible.
You know, and the reality of human sacrifice, right, is one that has existed forever. And we have to be able to understand it.
Yeah.
And if we understand the mimetic structure, we can understand that human sacrifice is something that did, in fact, preserve groups. And I hate to say it, like it worked. Because you know.
Well, you implied much earlier that every act we take is a sacrificial act. And some of that representation that emerges in the religious text is actually the propositionalization of the fact that human beings learned that you could make sacrifices and that would stabilize the future.
Yeah.
That's what you do when you work.
Yeah. But in the biblical story, then you have this weird situation where, you know, ancient cultures did practice human sacrifice. Like they would kill someone publicly, visibly, in order to bind the group together, to show that we're willing, you know, we're going to offer this thing up. And this is something that, by the way, you know, even in the Middle Ages, you had these stories, like if you know about the assassins, for example, in the Middle East, these Muslim jihadists that the leader would ask one to just jump off just to show. It's like, you want to see how tight we are? You up there, kill yourself. And they would just jump off into the pit and kill themselves. And it would bind everybody together. Everybody would be like, yeah, like we're holding together towards this purpose. See, the idea that human sacrifice is just a ridiculous superstition. Like it works. Now, how do you go beyond it? And I think that the story of Abraham starts to show that, right? Is that Abraham doesn't kill his son. Right, that there's something that if you offer
that's part of
the
that,
highest.
That's part of that translation of action into abstraction. It's like, so imagine that there are corporeal sacrifices that people act out, and then there's a realization at some point that pattern of sacrifice can be duplicated psychologically, can be duplicated spiritually. So it no longer, so that So the idea would be that if you sacrificed appropriately at the psychological level, you wouldn't have to sacrifice corporate.
Yeah. Or you could say
That's for sure. That's
yeah. So
true.
you could say, imagine that if we, let's say, if people all sacrifice to the very highest good, right? To the love that is the foundation of reality, right? The infinite goodness that is foundation of reality, then we wouldn't have those other sacrifices.
Yeah,
we wouldn't go to war. Like we wouldn't have to sacrifice literally sacrifice our children up. And so it's normal that the structure of that story looks that way.